Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the American Muslim Community Foundation's podcast, Muslim Philanthropy. Today we have on a special guest, Steve Sosebee. He is the president and founder of Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Steve.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. I've been following your work for the last several years and really impressed with it. And everybody that I come in contact that knows you and the organization always speaks highly of what you do. So it's just a real honor to have an opportunity to chat today.
Thank you for saying that. It's my honor, and it's a great honor to serve Palestine and to serve this noble cause.
For sure. I always love starting out with giving our guests the opportunity to share a little bit more about who they are.
Mhm.
Feel free to let people know where you grew up, kind of family life, where you
Mhm.
went to school, and kind of just walk us through that.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm pretty basic American middle class Midwestern upbringing. My father was a school teacher. My mom was a nurse. Raised in a college town in the Midwest, Kent, Ohio, in the 70s and 80s, which was, pre-internet, post-Vietnam, pretty special and, normal upbringing for the most part. My parents divorced when I was 13. But despite that, it was a pretty standard, general upbringing. However, I was always interested in international issues and in politics and issues related to social justice. My parents actually were quite active on all issues related to social justice and raised their children to be very conscious and aware of what was happening in the world, not only in our communities, but also abroad and countries beyond our borders. And therefore, I was raised even from an early age to kind of try to pay attention and to be sympathetic and conscious of how people were having to struggle for the privileges and the opportunities and the rights that we were born with in this country, particularly as a Caucasian American male. I'm probably the most privileged species in the history of mankind from just those very basic identifying features. But within that context, I was also, from kind of a working class family in the sense that, I had to work my way through college and pay for my own education and stuff like that, which instilled with me a very strong work ethic and a very strong sense of pride and, um, uh, uh, you know, accomplishing for myself and also not being dependent on others to provide for me what I could provide for myself. Of course, those opportunities were in abundance in this country, and for the reasons I mentioned before. In the town that I grew up in Kent, Ohio, we had, before I was conscious of what was going on in the world around me, an incident in which four students were killed protesting the Vietnam War. It was May 4th, 1970, a very historic moment. And if you were to Google that, you would find that that's the one not redeeming, but one factor that, or one issue that happened in this town, then which we're globally famous for. And being raised in a small town with that legacy over it, that made us a little bit more conscious, I would say, of issues like what was happening in Palestine. So when I started university in the mid '80s and was working my way through, the first Palestinian uprising began, and at that time I was already active politically on issues related to human rights and social justice, whether it was ending apartheid in South America, whether it was the issue in Central America where the U.S. government was supporting the death squads and very far right wing fascist governments. When the first Palestinian uprising began in December of 1987, it resonated with me more than it would probably with students or other young people all over the world, or at least in my country, the United States, because those symbols of unarmed students being shot and being brutalized and suppressed by armed military soldiers, which is what was happening in Palestine, also happened at my university in 1970. So I kind of had that connection and felt that sense of solidarity with what the Palestinians were going through and started to read up a lot about the history and the context, the political and the historical context of what was the root cause of the conflict in the Middle East. And it doesn't take long if you do so objectively and with an open mind and without applying any kind of biased connections to that region. You see clearly that the uprooting of the Palestinian indigenous population from Palestine starting with the Zionist movement in the late 1890s, and then obviously with the Balfour Declaration and the British colonization of Palestine in 1917, and the Zionist movement up through and shortly after World War II, in which the Jewish refugees who were brutally, had genocide committed against them in Europe, uh, fled to many of them fled to Palestine and started to create uh, an exclusionary state, a Zionist state, which denied the indigenous population their own national identity and political rights. So that's really the root cause, and it's not really a debatable historical analysis that I just provided there. It's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. How we then apply our own values and our own kind of let's just say what we do about this historical fact is what matters. I felt very strongly seeing young Palestinians struggling for freedom in the West Bank and Gaza, and knowing that their brothers and sisters in the refugee camps in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan were all seeking and struggling for their rights. um, I became very active in supporting the process of trying to educate Americans and my fellow students at the university, and trying to share with them some of the knowledge and awareness that I had on this issue. Um, and in the process of doing so, I met a lot of fellow Palestinian students, graduate students mainly at the university, who shared with me their personal stories of living under occupation and how hard life was from a personal point of view, from that human connection, which is essential for these kind of issues. And it kind of inspired me to even be more active and to speak stronger on this issue, because I felt that I understood the historical and political context. And I think as Americans, we have to apply our values and our let's just say our political values as people who believe in individual rights and individual freedom and the rule of law, and at least in theory. That should be applied to all issues, whether it's Palestine or our brothers and sisters in South Africa or anywhere in the world, those who are fighting the communism and living under totalitarian regimes and so on. However, in Palestine, we had even a stronger, let's say, responsibility as Americans because of our financial support, military support for the Israeli government, and how they were using that political, financial, and military support to deny Palestinians their rights. And therefore, we as Americans have even a stronger responsibility to work for freedom and equality there in Palestine than we do in any other issue in the world, in my opinion, because of our financial role in the subjugation and the oppression of the Palestinian people. I was chosen to go on a human rights delegation in the first year of the First Intifada, December of 1988. The ADC, the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee in Washington, was putting together tours of the West Bank called Eyewitness Israel, and I was selected to go and see firsthand with 9 other college students what was happening on the ground there. And it was a life-changing experience. I got to see for 3 weeks during Christmas break between my junior year in college. I saw firsthand the hardship and struggle of the Palestinians, the settlements, the refugee camps, the checkpoints, the demonstrations, the brutal repression of those demonstrations, the confiscation of property, the imprisonment without trial, the children who are being injured, the effect of rubber bullets on a child's head, and so on and so forth. I saw that firsthand. And I left after 3 weeks of touring the Gaza Strip and West Bank very much inspired and motivated to go back and share that truth with my fellow students and fellow Americans. Actually, that was the main message that Palestinians, when they heard about our delegation and what our purpose was there to see what was happening firsthand, was just to share
Hmm.
that truth with people back home. They were not asking for anything but other just the awareness that what they were
Right.
undergoing was intolerable from a human point of view. So I went back and I finished school, and was very active on the Palestinian issue, and went back to Palestine to work as a journalist after I graduated in the early 90s, actually 1990, 1989, and began really focusing on sharing those stories, everyday stories, as a journalist in Palestine. And during the course of that work, I met a brother and sister from Hebron, Al Khalil, in the southern West Bank. Children who had had their legs, the boy had had his legs and hand blown off, and the girl had suffered terrible compound fractures of her legs from an
Hmm.
Israeli bomb. and wanted to help them. I did a story about it, but I didn't feel that that was the extent of the my responsibility. I
Hmm.
think when you learn when you see something that's wrong, you have a responsibility to try to correct that, not just in writing or speaking, but also in real action. So I went back home to Ohio and shared the story of these children with a Lebanese orthopedic surgeon, a Lebanese American orthopedic surgeon in Akron, Ohio, and he agreed to help us arrange treatment for this child. And in May of 1990, I brought the first two injured kids to the United States, first two kids who ever came from Palestine to the United
Wow.
States for free medical care. And it was a big story. It was on the front page of the newspapers, it was on the local news, and it was the first time
Mm.
Americans saw with their own eyes the human side of the Palestinian struggle. They saw with their own eyes the first time children, Palestinian children who were victims of and of the hundreds and thousands of children who've been injured in the first Intifada. These were two living human, let's say, symbols in the embodiment of the Palestinian struggle for Americans to see with their own eyes. And it wasn't, the usual process of the mainstream media, especially at that time before the internet, was to really deny these type of images from being seen by the large majority of Americans. Well,
Yeah.
here were these two children in the local community being seen and people meeting them and it really was my intention as a journalist was to share these stories and to bring these kind of this awareness to my fellow tax-paying Americans. And by having these kids come for treatment in the United States, we were able to accomplish much more than I could ever do as a journalist. So that was a real let's say imperative for me to continue to help kids. In addition to that, it really organized and galvanized the Palestinian and Arab and Muslim community and solidarity community, people like myself, in the area where these kids were being treated, who took care of them. They came without their parents, and it really inspired the community to get active because people are very much were very proud of the Palestinians living and struggling and resisting occupation, and wanted to find a way to contribute and support that cause. So that was a good way to organize people and keep them really part of the Palestinian struggle. And so and the most importantly was that these kids were getting the treatment they couldn't get back home. So when these
Yeah.
kids went, the brother and sister went back home walking again with new legs and after surgery and months of treatment and speaking English and having money now for college and all of the things that we could possibly do to help them,
Hmm.
people heard about them and came to me with so many more children who needed treatment. There was a little
Wow.
girl who was burned.
Yeah, having a little technical difficulty with
Okay,
the
I'm gonna
audio.
take this up.
Yep, it just worked better now. So I wanted to ask, and this is all like phenomenal just to kind of hear firsthand from you about how this all started and the stories behind it and the impact that it created in the local community and what I'm assuming is now the genesis of PCRF about to happen. But what I'm discerning from this is that, people who are just now finding about the Palestinian issue because of the social media highlighting all the stuff that's been happening the last several months is like none of this is new. This has been happening for decades, right? And part of me feels like, is it ever going to get better, right? But the other side of it that brings me such hope is people like you that are thoroughly committed to making life better for the Palestinian people. So, there's just like ebbs and flows, and sometimes so many people feel helpless and don't know what to do in these scenarios. But for me, the solution is learning about Palestine Children's Relief Fund, learning about so many other places and people that are helping out to make a difference. And, you talked about like wanting to do more and beyond just the journalistic approach and like taking action and connecting the dots between the surgeon and the kids and everything like that. Like, to me, that's what our faith calls us to do, to be leaders in taking action when you see injustice, right? So just kudos to you for that. And now that your audio issue is resolved, please resume. Oh no, it's not resolved. Let's see. We'll pause a quick second.
Yeah, so as people brought me more children who need medical care, that's when I realized that I could do something more important than being a journalist or just writing stories, which, I think previous to the internet and even today, I mean, it's important that we share that we share information, that we try to educate people. It's not an either or situation. That's always a responsibility, and that's what you're doing, and I respect that, and that's why I'm here. I think it's one of the most important things. The fact that we still have people that don't understand this issue from its actual factual context is amazing to me, because now we have an overabundance of information, and a lot of it's obviously distorted and fake. But for the most part, we know really what's happening on the ground in Palestine, and we know the brutality and the suffering and the hardship of the Palestinian people. And we also should know the amazing courage and humanity of the Palestinian people, and how much they have shown the world this sense of determination and resilience, which all of us should respect and admire and applaud and support. This is part of it, but I do believe strongly that we have to take real action, and each of us has to find whatever areas of action we can do, which fits our talents or our abilities or our time, our resources, our experience, whatever. And mine happened to be, somebody who was on the ground in Palestine. I could serve as, with my communication background as a journalist, I could serve as that bridge between a child who needed medical care and a physician in a hospital and a community that could
Hmm.
take care of them in Detroit or Houston or Los Angeles or wherever we could send kids for free care. And that's how we started. And in the course, I met my first wife, Huda Al Masri, who was a social worker in Palestine, and she was working with helping kids there as well during the Intifada, and we met and we fell in love and we started a life and a family together. And she was an instrumental part of building this organization the first 17 years. I mean, she was hardworking, dedicated, took care of the kids that we sent to the States. We've sent over 2,000 children for free medical care, and she
Wow.
was just somebody who made it happen
Hmm.
with her, strength and intelligence and humanity and dedication. She was instrumental in making the PCR what it is today. In addition to that, as we grew, the internet happened and communication became instantaneous, and it became a very powerful tool to enable us to reach people and reach places that we never before were able to do so instantaneously in a very efficient and cost-effective way. So before, when I started the organization, I was writing letters on a typewriter and sending them by fax. And within a very short period of time, I'm an OG in that regard.
Yeah.
Uh, and the, and within a short period of time, all of this could be done instantaneously with a computer, and that just transformed an organization like ours to be more efficient and to have a much bigger impact. And for those 17 years, my wife Huda and I, we built an organization. We really expanded it and started sending teams of doctors there to operate on kids and bringing kids out for medical treatment and starting humanitarian projects and programs, and just got through the first Intifada, the Oslo Accords. Everything kind of fell apart. The second Intifada, raising our kids. We had two daughters on the ground in Palestine, living and just really trying to build something that could have a positive impact on the lives of the Palestinian people, particularly Palestinian children.
Hmm.
On Christmas Day of 2008, my wife was diagnosed with cancer,
Hmm.
and by July 15th, which is coming up next week, she was the anniversary. She passed away in
So
2009.
sorry to
So
hear.
yeah, and I mean, this is God's will. These are things that in life we all have to kind of deal with, different types of struggles and challenges, unpredictable ones. And I think it's important to always remember that if you have faith, and I think most people do, um, that there is a bigger purpose and bigger meaning to life than what we see in the material world.
Yeah.
And if you believe that there is something more beyond the material world, then hopefully that gives you strength to get through periods of this type of loss and suffering and grief and crisis. And I had
Hmm.
two young girls to raise. My wife had just passed away. um, I went back to Palestine with my daughters and just put all of my grief and energy and focus into building the organization stronger and bigger, and expanding our impact and reach, and doing a better job.
Yeah.
And we built the first cancer hospital for children in my wife's honor. She died from cancer. Named it after her. It's the first and only public cancer department in Palestine.
Wow.
Still open and functioning, doing a great job in Bethlehem. And the organization just really became much bigger, with so many factors and so many reasons. The most important reason is because we've stayed true to our culture and to our values, which is to serve the humanitarian needs of Palestinian children and to serve
Hmm.
the cause of helping kids who otherwise can't get the care they need. And using people's different forms of support and talents and resources to change the lives of tens of thousands of kids all over the Middle East, not just in
Yeah.
Palestine, but Syria and Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, wherever we can have an impact. So, we've
Yeah.
grown into one of those organizations, hopefully, that will continue to change and impact these children in a way that gives them hope, love, compassion, and gives Palestinians, and not just Palestinians, but people all over the world who care about this issue, who care about humanity, who care about children, who care about justice, to come forward and be a part of our mission. Because all of those areas, humanity, justice, children, freedom, compassion, that's what we're doing. That's our mission, is to bring those values and bring that energy into serving the children in Palestine.
That's really beautiful. And, um, I think that with the Palestinian diaspora, especially within the Middle East, like, there's so many people who are living in those surrounding countries as well that you're able to then help and benefit. And I want to talk a little bit and get your insight on how that growth and as a nonprofit leader, like you managed. And I also want to then ask you about like the specific programs at PCRF. So feel free
Mhm.
to answer those in any order, but would love to hear more about just like the operations of PCRF, what the team looks like now, and how
Mhm.
you managed that growth in the programs at PCRF.
Yeah, well, I mean, the growth of the PCRF has been pretty tremendous. I think we've more than doubled our staffing and our team in the past 7 or 8 years. We've more than tripled our donations and support we get, and we've taken on much bigger projects. We're completing these multi-million-dollar hospital infrastructure projects, which before we didn't have the resources to do. We're completing an intensive care unit for babies, for children in Ramallah, a pediatric cardiology department, and a cath lab also in Ramallah. These are two huge, huge infrastructure construction projects with equipment and so on, multi-million-dollar endeavors. We built and opened in 2019 the first and only multi-million-dollar cancer department for children in Gaza. So these are tremendous, tremendous uh, programs and projects, in addition to continuing our core mission of helping individual kids get access to humanitarian aid and medical care. So we provide surgery for Lebanese and Syrian and Palestinian refugees in hospitals in Lebanon and Jordan by crowdfunding for them weekly through our newsletters. And we send hundreds of medical teams to the Middle East every year, pre-COVID, of course, to provide urgent free surgery for children on the ground, as well as um, training for local doctors. We send out dozens of children a year for free medical care they can't get locally. We provide a variety of different types of humanitarian projects for kids who are amputees, for kids who are orphans, for kids who are with chronic medical conditions that require monthly sponsorship. So really, we're trying to cover all the different bases. And again, we're not a political organization. We're not a religious organization in the sense that we help any child that comes in need of help. We don't ask them what's their nationality or what's their religion. We help them based on what their needs are. And that's why we've been able to really grow and build an organization. We have 6 offices in the West Bank, mostly small satellite offices in Jenin, Tulkarm, Nablus, Bethlehem, and Hebron, and then the main office in Ramallah. And then in Gaza, we have three, and one in the south in Rafah, one in the central refugee camp of Deir al-Balah, and then one in Gaza City, which was bombed on May 17th during an Israeli airstrike on the Ministry of Health. So our office was destroyed there. We also have in Amman, Jordan, and in Beirut, Lebanon, offices to ensure that we are providing refugees access to the same humanitarian care that we provide on the ground in Palestine. We're chapter-based, volunteer-based organization, so we have
Hmm.
chapters all over the country, about 40 active chapters in the United States, in
Wow.
the Gulf area, in Jordan. We have thousands of volunteers, from doctors to high school kids, who give their
Hmm.
time to support our work. and we're very, very fortunate that that people see PCRF as a way, as a symbol of hope, and as an organization that they can turn to help during times of crisis.
Yeah, I think, just hearing this in terms of the genesis of the organization and where it's at today, um, it's really inspiring to see your commitment. And tell me a little bit more about just like surrounding yourself with people that you can rely on and kind of leading multi-million dollar organization and kind of like seeing all the moving parts and pieces. Like, what advice do you have to people who may be in the international relief space or are interested in um, these types of projects, and just a little bit of insight on what it takes to kind of lead these types of efforts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. For me, it was a very natural fit to kind of lead and build this organization. And, as we grew and we took on bigger projects and took on bigger staff and bigger responsibilities and had bigger priorities when it came to fundraising and having the resources that enabled us to take on these bigger projects, obviously this became a bigger burden and a bigger challenge, time-wise and management-wise. So, within that context, you do need to rely on people who share the common humanitarian values that you built the organization on, and people who share the same kind of work ethic and dedication to the organization's mission, and that you remain focused to your true values and humanitarian ideals. For anybody who is looking to get into this type of work or wants to do this kind of work, let's say separate from PCRF, but is interested in doing something on their own in the field of humanitarian relief or nonprofit work, I think it's a issue of dedication. Like, you really have to live the mission, you have to be part of it, you have to dedicate your life to it, and that's hard because we have families and we have other responsibilities, and it's a challenge to do that. But if you believe in yourself, if you stay dedicated, if you don't allow failure or obstacles or challenges to stop you from what you believe your mission and purpose is, then I think it's just a matter of time before you have success. Again, a lot of people don't reach a point of success because they allow all of the failures and challenges and obstacles that come up in their lives or in their work to derail them. I can, if you had a longer program, go through a long list of times and periods in starting this organization when I was close to quitting, simply
Mm,
because we didn't have because of so many factors and so many
yeah.
reasons. But I stuck to it because my main goal was to help these kids, and I knew,
Hmm.
and I believe today, that the goodness in people always outweighs whatever challenges you have, whether it's human challenges or material challenges or even your own spiritual questioning that we all go through in life, especially when you're younger.
Right.
You have to stay true to your vision and to your mission and to who you are as a person. If you believe in what you're doing, you're going to be okay. That's what I believe.
So, yeah, no, I think definitely the can-do attitude has a huge significance. And what I would love to hear from you is like, what are some of those resources that you relied on to feel more confident in your own leadership, in leading this organization? And, a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome or talk about um, being burnt out. But what are some things that you've held in your Rolodex to kind of help you through that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I know what imposter syndrome is, but it's kind of a little bit self-explanatory, but maybe you can define it for me in a bit. But just to let you know, I mean, look, what gets me through and what got me through 30 years of building and running this organization was just seeing the impact that we were having on the lives of the people that we were helping. And how many times I sat at checkpoints or was turned away from checkpoints, or living in through intifadas and through wars in Gaza, and seeing firsthand all of the terrible destruction and brutality and injustice that goes on every day in Palestine, and also the hardship of building an organization and having people who don't have the same intentions or same values that you might have involved and undermining frequently the work that you're trying to accomplish. At the end of the day, if you focus on the good that you can do and the people that you can help and the impact that you can have, that's what can get you through. When you reach a point where you can't have that impact any longer, or the people around you are just too overwhelming when it comes to the negativity of their intentions, then it's, you can always move on and find something else to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think seeing impact and having a vision, seeing it through. I'm just, a highly motivated person, and I love vision boarding and I love all of those things. And when I put my mind to that goal, like I love achieving it. And I've often seen myself doing that for smaller nonprofit organizations, and having founded AMCF, I resonate with a lot of what you're saying as well. But yeah, imposter syndrome is kind of exactly how it sounds. It's just about not feeling the self confidence or doubting your own abilities, or like, how am I the person to lead all of this kind of thing. So it's more about like self doubt, which can often become a crippling factor, and then not necessarily having the resources, the leadership development, or the capacity building to get through that can be a challenge.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think in terms
Well,
of like, yeah, go ahead.
let me just say this. I mean, I think that those are natural feelings. I mean, we all go through that, and anybody who has that you feel has this overwhelming sense of confidence in their abilities, often are that in itself is just a facade. And I think it's natural to feel, especially when you're trying to take on really difficult and challenging endeavors, building something from the bottom up or from nothing, can require, I mean, does require, a certain element of uh, confidence that you have to often just bring upon yourself, even without any justification for it. But at the same time, feeling a sense of insecurity or this imposter syndrome that you mentioned is normal, and that's natural, and it's part of the development of ourselves individually and ourselves professionally. The spiritual development has that aspect to it, and as does our professional development. So it's natural. I think and I go through it every single day. So we all have to struggle with these aspects of day-to-day life, and the challenges of living in a society that looks for immediate gratification, or this kind of fake social media world that we live in, where everybody's perfect and everybody's
Yeah,
successful, and trying to put that to the side and focus on the micro successes that you can achieve,
for
and build
sure.
on those. And it's hard. There's a lot of
Yeah.
noise. There's a lot of chatter. We all go through it. I go through it, and it's hard to sometimes put those to the side. But and that's often what the challenge is, more often than anything else, is staying true to your spiritual vision and who you are as a person, and being confident in your abilities.
Yeah, I think that is all great things to keep in mind, especially for people who um, are trying to stick to a goal, accomplish it. The micro accomplishments is a great way to kind of feel like you've gotten through the day. I know I love listing out all of my to-do lists, and I just kind of cross them off as I go along. And I fall behind on a lot of stuff. I feel under the weight of and the burden of having to lead an organization a lot. And yeah, I think the more you can surround yourself with people who share your vision, the easier it becomes to accomplish. So,
I
I've
agree.
been profoundly indebted to the board of directors and the staff at AMCF, and I'm sure you feel the same way, of just bringing people along in this journey. And to me, that's been the best part, is being able to work with other people on a common goal.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
100%.
Cool. Yeah, is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you'd like to share?
I mean, these are difficult times in general, just because of the pressure for young people. I mean, I suspect you have, considering, the technology you're using, that a lot of your viewers and a lot of the people who are following your work are young Muslim Americans. And, that's that we have kind of two forces at play here for young people in the United States, particularly young people, young Muslim Americans, is that you have so much opportunity and so many resources available to you, like what you're utilizing here, to empower you and to do things that your parents' generation and forefathers couldn't even imagine the opportunity to reach, people, and to use your ideas and your abilities and your creative energies to do something that can educate and change the world. So there's a huge opportunity for people, and at the same time there's all of this negativity and pressure and forces out there to kind of derail you, whether it's other people who are giving you the evil eye and don't want you to succeed. It's we're living in a very materialistic culture and a very
Hmm.
materialistic society that values your looks or your possessions over who you are as an individual and what you're doing with your time and your energies. I mean, those are day-to-day struggles that you have to go through. And I think the only thing I can really say to people who are watching is just, you know, try to reduce the noise in your life. Try to, um, you know, stay off of those channels which are negative, and focus on the good things that you can do. You know, your family, your friends, your community, your religion, and the people who need your help. You, as all of us, each one of us out there, can have an impact in somebody else's life in a positive way. My story is proof of that. I am not an exceptional person. I don't have a fancy education. I don't have a huge amount of, or any amount of, personal wealth. I'm just somebody who um, believed in something and followed a course in life that gave me purpose and meaning. And at the end of the day, I'm now 55 years old, so I've been doing this for over 30 years. That purpose and meaning is what has sustained me through the loss of my wife, watching my wife die from cancer. That slow,
Hmm.
miserable, painful, excruciating death that cancer is.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what should energize and empower each of us. The noise of wealth, the fake success that people promote, um, the judgment and negativity that surrounds us in the material world should not be part of who you are or allowed you to dictate your course in life. That's all I
Yeah.
have to say.
Uh, this very reflective and sombering and just um, a really positive reflection on a difficult situation as well. So thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your journey, your life, your mission. And I'm so honored, again, just to have these few minutes with you and to learn more about Palestine Children's Relief Fund. I encourage everybody to go to pcrf.net, find them on social media at the PCRF. If you want to be a volunteer, if you want to be a donor, AMCF is so honored to have you in our nonprofit directory and support your
Thank
work.
you.
And I think this is a really great way for people to get a first look at Palestine Children's Relief Fund,
Mhm.
and really just be inspired by you, Steve. I think that
Thank you.
you finding your purpose, everybody struggles with that. It seems that you have been able to put a lot of energy and time into PCRF, and it's shown. So definitely be proud of all of the accomplishments. And I know you personally probably have even grander visions ahead of you. So on that journey, just I wish you the best of success. And if there's any
Thank
way
you.
that AMCF can be part of that story and journey, we would be honored to.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. And keep up the good work there. You guys are doing a great job. And, anytime you need anything from me or from PCRF, just let me know. We're happy to help.
That means a lot. So thank you again for joining and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. My pleasure. Anytime. Thanks so much.
Yep. Bye bye. Salam.
Bye.